Ladies and gentlemen, the Commander of Marine Corps Forces Special Operations Command, Major General Joseph L. Osterman.
Well, good morning, General Berger, General Miller, General Colonies, distinguished guests, family, and friends. It's really a great honor to be here today with everyone. A beautiful day to recognize truly 6 extraordinary Marines. And with that, in recognition, what we're really picking up on today is the gallantry and valor of these 6 Marines and what they did during combat operations in Afghanistan. I think it's only appropriate today that we actually do all of these awards together, because it was all for the same action, it was all for the same teamwork that was applied in the situation that they were in, and really combine what we do as Marines and sailors, where we have activities and we have, in this case, combat operations, where it always takes the team to make it work. And in this case, that cohesion, that competence, that bravery and professionalism really epitomized what that team concept is all about and what these Marines were all about. What I'd like to also mention with this is that as a description of this comes out and as you start to hear these award citations read, it really does talk to and define what special operations is all about. We had a group of Marines out there working in the western areas of Afghanistan, operating in a small unit environment, literally single digits worth of Marines associated with this particular operation. It was a joint operation. There were not only soldiers involved, but this particular incident erupted out of the fact that they were in a blocking position where we had an Army unit that was pushing the enemy through towards their position, so that they were positioned in a way to support that Army drive using not only U.S. Army, but also the Afghan Army as well. And with that, when I talk about indigenous forces, again, what special operators do in terms of working with those types of missions overseas with different countries. In this case, not only with their team, but also the Afghan local police, the Afghan Army that was working in conjunction with them. Another aspect I think that really touches on the fact in terms of special ops units is the fact that very, very lethal. Here they were in a situation where literally the enemy outnumbered them multiple times over. The enemy had the advantage in terms of geographic position. They had the advantage in terms of local firepower. Everything was working against that team, and yet through their coordinated efforts, through their expertise, and through their ability to support each other, they generated a force and a lethality that was much greater than each of them as an individual and what you would normally associate with a group of men of that size and that kind of a unit. As the chaplain alluded to, incredibly calm under fire. They also threw out, and again, you'll pick this up in the citations, under extreme stress that is well beyond what we can even simulate in training, let alone what many Marines have ever even experienced in their careers. So it really makes, in this particular case, a very, very unique situation in terms of why these Marines were being awarded today and recognized for that incredible achievement that they had. Never leaving a Marine behind, another tenet of these teams. In this particular case, 2 Marines being shot literally right from the beginning, one so severely that they thought he was deceased, and the other, the captain, shot in such a way that he could not self-evacuate, that he required evacuation up on top of a roof, difficult terrain, under fire, and yet, despite all of the incoming fire, despite all of the arduous situations associated with that, the team coming back together to pull those 2 Marines in order to save them, give them life-saving care, and be able to get them prepared for evacuation. On top of that, you get to the point where, again, under the never leaving a Marine behind, they're in the LZ. It's too hot an LZ for the helicopters to actually land and conduct the evacuation. The helicopters are getting shot. They have to wave off. So in the open, you have this team of Marines with two of their wounded comrades literally shielding those Marines with their own bodies until they can bring in enough suppressive fire using both aviation and indirect fire assets in order to, knock down the enemy fire enough to let the helicopters come in again. So this is the kind of bravery, this is the kind of valor, the kind of gallantry that we're talking about and that we're actually recognizing today that is so significant. I would like to say that, their actions, to be honest with you, are a continuation of the proud legacy that we as MARSOC trace all the way back to our Raider roots in World War II. The heroism that was exhibited by those battalions in World War II that's carried on through these Marines and the Marines all around you today and the sailors assigned to the Marines literally live that legacy and continue to prove themselves on the battlefield and off the battlefield in the most professional ways. I think it's important to kind of recognize that just in the short existence, literally this year, 9 years of MARSOC coming about, if you think about 9 years of MARSOC and you think about the fact that there's never more than about 2,500, 2,700 Marines ever associated with MARSOC at any given point in time, in that 9 years with the awards today, there will have been awarded 8 Navy Crosses, 21 Silver Stars, 191 Purple Hearts, and 216 Bronze Stars with V. That speaks volumes about the type of men and women that are associated with MARSOC, and to be honest with you, the courageous activity they carry out as those small teams doing special operations activities in support of our nation's goals and objectives. So they really, the Marines we have today really add to that legacy and are really in keeping with what our Raider legacy is all about. So with that, I'd like to conclude my remarks, and we'll move on to do the first of the recognitions, which is awarding Gunnery Sergeant Jacklin the Navy Cross.
Now taking his position is Sergeant Major John W. Scott, Sergeant Major, United States Marine Corps Forces, Special Operations Command. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we will present the Navy Cross Award. As we prepare to do so, we ask that all military guests please rise for the reading of the award citation. Attention to orders. The President of the United States takes pleasure in presenting the Navy Cross to Gunnery Sergeant Brian C. Jacklin, United States Marine Corps, for service as set forth in the following citation. For extraordinary heroism while serving with 1st Marine Special Operations Battalion in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. On the morning of 14 June 2012, Gunnery Sergeant Jacklin was second in command of a team conducting village stability operations in the volatile Upper Gereshk Valley of Helmand Province. The enemy suddenly poured heavy fire into the team's position, and his team leader and another Marine each suffered life-threatening gunshot wounds. Without hesitation, Gunnery Sergeant Jacklin seized control of the situation and orchestrated a counterattack. Finding the primary communications link inoperable, he personally established an alternate means with a nearby supporting unit and began prosecuting direct, indirect, and aviation fires on the enemy, while simultaneously coordinating evacuation of the casualties. He courageously led his team out of their compound and through open terrain in order to secure a landing zone, but enemy ground fire initially forced the CASEVAC aircraft to wave off. Gunnery Sergeant Jacklin remained in the open, raining M203 grenades on the enemy and directing the fires of his team until the aircraft could land and evacuate the wounded. Later that night, his team was relieved and placed by another Special Operations unit, but Gunnery Sergeant Jacklin voluntarily remained behind. And throughout the raging battle all the next day, he provided vital intelligence, tactical assistance, and deadly accurate personal fires. Throughout 48 hours, he inspired all around him as he led a vicious fight to defeat a determined enemy force. By his decisive actions, bold initiative, and complete dedication to duty, Gunnery Sergeant Jacklin reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and the United States Naval Service. For the President, Ray Mavis, Secretary of the Navy. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. We are now honored to have Gunnery Sergeant Jacklin speak.
How are we all doing today? Have to excuse me, I wrote everything down to make sure I effectively captured everything I wanted to say here. But first things first, thank you all for taking the time to come and be part of such a tremendous occasion. I'd like to start by saying how proud and humbled I am to receive such a prestigious award. This is an honor that will remain with me through the rest of my life, and I thank you for the opportunity to represent both MARSOC and the Marine Corps in accepting it. However, the power and merits of this organization can never be measured in one man's actions alone. It is in the collective bond we share throughout the course of our service together that enables the great acts of heroism and sacrifice that have become the standard among operators of our unit. Truly, this ceremony is a testament to the courage and devotion exhibited on a regular basis by rough men, ready to do whatever is necessary to make good on the faith that our brothers and command put in us. These are men who would rather die than live with the shame that they didn't offer their last breath in service to the man to their left and the right in battle. These men you see before you here today, along with H1 Walker and Staff Sergeant Pass, who could not be here due to operational commitments, embody the very best that the Marine Corps and MARSOC have to offer. Each man was shaped through immense trials of personal fortitude and dedication, giving all he had to offer at times when only the great pride of walking the path least traveled was there to keep him company. Through consistent discipline, drive, and sacrifice, they have risen to the top of their trade and embody the ethos of the Marine Raider, a man who displays the very pinnacle of soldierly virtue and unwavering loyalty. A man who will never quit or surrender, and who will at all times stand ready to sacrifice whatever is needed to accomplish the mission. The men who swell the ranks around you here today are these men, and stand as shining examples of what our nation entrusts its freedoms and respect to. There's never been a prouder experience in my military career than June 14th and 15th of 2012. Not because of anything I did, but because of what I saw done by others. There is no way to express the magnitude of heroism and destruction that is possible when men of extraordinary skill and tenacity lay everything on the line for each other. Nothing is more awe-inspiring than the look on the fellow operator's face as they're surrounded by death. The casual smile of confidence as they acknowledge that things will be what they'll be, and if this is the way we die, then let's do it right and honor our legacy. When surrounded on all sides by 7 to 8 times our numbers, we faced what seemed the inevitability of death as we attempted a daytime casevac of our grievously wounded. Not a man before you here today skipped a beat in their commitment to seeing their injured brothers home. All or nothing, death or glory, these men before you charged out into the heaviest barrage of fire I've seen in over 10 years of heavy combat to get the job done. Their resolute determination and violence of action, coupled with divine intervention, secured the lives of Captain Herrera and Sergeant Breer that day. I have no doubt that had we not been forged in the severest of training, and God did not have purpose for us in this life, that we would not be standing here. I would also like to acknowledge the other key players who kept us alive through the fight. To Lieutenant Colonel Brooks and Master Gunnery Sergeant Kelly, thank you for your tireless efforts to ensure we had every authority and resource necessary to turn the tide of momentum in our favor. You never questioned our actions on the ground, only what we needed to win. This trust in small unit leadership speaks volumes for what MARSOC has become and its promise for future endeavors. To the brave air crews and close air support and CAS platforms who routinely flew through hails of gunfire to kill our enemy and rescue our wounded, you are and always will be the guardian angels of the man on the ground, and you deserve every praise we can offer. To our brave brethren of SEAL Team 3, who came out to reinforce and fight with us throughout the second day of carnage, your efforts and professionalism are not forgotten. These SEALs fought with us side by side at a cost of casualties of their own. As we move forward towards a future of integrated operations, I will always remember the steadfast valor exhibited by these men and hold only the highest of esteem for their capabilities. Most importantly, I would like to thank our wives and families who stand by us through our trials and successes and who take a back seat to the teams at home so that we can go live the dream around the world, who often wait in vain for the men they love to come home, only to find out that we are no longer as they remembered, but hardened and callous to family life. Your struggles are infinitely harder than ours, and your payoff all too often falls short of that deserved. For the families of those loved and lost in service, most recently the tragic helicopter crash off the coast of Florida, our thoughts and prayers are with you. You are and always will be family to us, holding a sacred place in our hearts and by our sides. Finally, I have no greater honor or satisfaction in this life than to have been afforded opportunity to serve with the men who fill our ranks here today. I am eternally grateful to be accepted amongst them and that I may hold my head high in their presence. The wisdom of the old breed, combined with the vigor of our new, inspires me daily to earn my place amongst these warriors. There can be no resting on our laurels here, for every day brings new challenges and triumphs, and we will always stand ready to meet them head on, with smiles on our faces and determination in our hearts. Brothers, never above you, never below you, always beside you. Semper Fidelis.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we will present the Bronze Star Awards. As we prepare to do so, we ask that all military guests please rise for the reading of the award citations. The President of the United States takes pleasure in presenting the Bronze Star Medal to Staff Sergeant William C. Simpson IV, United States Marine Corps, for service as set forth in the following citation. For heroic achievement in connection with combat operations against the enemy on 14 June 2012 as an element leader with 1st Marine Special Operations Battalion in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. While conducting village stability operations in the volatile Upper Gereshk Valley of Helmand Province, Staff Sergeant Simpson's team came under heavy enemy fire. 2 team members immediately fell critically wounded in an exposed rooftop position. Staff Sergeant Simpson fearlessly led his element through an open field swept by enemy fire in order to render aid to the wounded Marines. Disregarding his own safety, he scaled a ladder to the roof and exposed himself to enemy fire in order to pull one of the wounded Marines down to safety. He then expertly applied life-saving combat casualty care while stabilizing the wounded for the pending medical evacuation. Unfazed by the barrage of enemy fire, he designated a litter-bearing team and courageously led them into an open field covered by enemy fire in order to evacuate his wounded comrades. By his bold initiative, undaunted courage, and total dedication to duty, Staff Sergeant Simpson reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and the United States Naval Service. The Combat Distinguishing Device is authorized. For the President, Ray Mavis, Secretary of the Navy. The President of the United States takes pleasure in presenting the Bronze Star Medal to Staff Sergeant Hafiz B. Hussein, United States Marine Corps, for service as set forth in the following citation. For heroic achievement in connection with combat operations against the enemy on 14 June 2012 as an assistant element leader with 1st Marine Special Operations Battalion in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. While conducting village stability operations in the volatile Upper Gereshk Valley of Helmand Province, Staff Sergeant Hussein's team came under heavy enemy fire. The initial volley of fire critically wounded 2 team members in an exposed rooftop position. Without hesitation, Staff Sergeant Hussein's element maneuvered through an open field saturated with enemy fire in order to reach their wounded comrades. Exposing himself once again to enemy fire, Staff Sergeant Hussein scaled the ladder to the rooftop and handed one of the wounded Marines down to the corpsman waiting below. He then assisted in rendering emergency medical care as the evacuation helicopters approached. Staff Sergeant Hussein courageously acted as a litter bearer, carrying the wounded through an open field covered by enemy fire to reach the landing zone. By his zealous initiative and total dedication to duty, Staff Sergeant Hussein reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and the United States Naval Service. The combat distinguishing device is authorized. For the President, Ray Mavis, Secretary of the Navy. The President of the United States takes pleasure in presenting the Bronze Star Medal to Sergeant William P. Hall, United States Marine Corps, for service as set forth in the following citation. For heroic achievement in connection with combat operations against the enemy while serving with 1st Marine Special Operations Battalion in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. On 14 June 2012, while conducting village stability operations in the volatile Upper Gereshk Valley of Helmand Province, Sergeant Hall's team came under heavy enemy fire that immediately critically wounded 2 team members. Sergeant Hall boldly took charge of the contingent of Afghan local police, repeatedly exposing himself to enemy fire as he positioned and directed their fires on the enemy. When aviation assets approached to extract his wounded comrades, Sergeant Hall led an element of the Afghan local police into the landing zone through a barrage of enemy fire. Without regard for his own personal safety and under relentless enemy fire, he held the outer security perimeter with the Afghans under his charge, ultimately enabling the helicopters to land and the critically wounded Marines to be evacuated. By his bold action, zealous initiative, and total dedication to duty, Sergeant Hall reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and the United States Naval Service. The combat distinguishing device is authorized. For the President, Ray Mavis, Secretary of the Navy. The President of the United States takes pleasure in presenting the Bronze Star Medal to Sergeant David E. Harris, United States Marine Corps, for service as set forth in the following citation. For heroic achievement in connection with combat operations against the enemy as a joint terminal attack controller with 1st Marine Special Operations Battalion in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. On 14 June 2012, Sergeant Harris's team came under attack while conducting village stability operations in the volatile Upper Gereshk Valley of Helmand Province. The team leader and another Marine were critically wounded in the initial volley of fire, and the enemy was closing within 100 meters distance. Amid this chaos, Sergeant Harris simultaneously developed and executed a seamless close air support plan to prosecute enemy targets, while identifying a suitable landing zone for casualty evacuation. Exposing himself on open terrain swept with enemy fire, he directed aviation fires in order to secure the landing zone, enabling the evacuation of his wounded comrades. Later that night, when his team was relieved and placed by a larger special operations unit, Sergeant Harris volunteered to remain behind, and throughout an intense battle the next day, he continued to prosecute targets and coordinate casualty evacuation until the enemy was finally defeated. By his zealous initiative, decisiveness, and total dedication to duty, Sergeant Harris reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and the United States Naval Service. The combat distinguishing device is authorized. For the President, Ray Mavis, Secretary of the Navy. The President of the United States takes pleasure in presenting the Bronze Star Medal to Staff Sergeant Christopher W. Buckminster, United States Marine Corps, for service as set forth in the following citation. For heroic achievement in connection with combat operations against the enemy as Special Intelligence Operator, Marine Special Operations Team 8131, Marine Special Operations Company C, 1st Marine Special Operations Battalion, Marine Special Operations Regiment, U.S. Marine Corps Forces Special Operations Command, in support of Operation Enduring Freedom on 14 June 2012. While conducting village stability operations in the Upper Gereshk Valley of Afghanistan's volatile Helmand province, Staff Sergeant Buckminster's patrol came under heavy and accurate volumes of small arms, medium machine gun, and rocket-propelled grenade fire. With 2 Marines lying helpless with life-threatening gunshot wounds, Staff Sergeant Buckminster courageously exposed himself to enemy fire as he verified enemy fighting positions, correlating with his sensitive reporting equipment in order for close air and indirect fire support assets to accurately engage enemy fighting positions. This resulted in the crucial suppression needed for his team to recover the wounded. With an evacuation helicopter descending into the zone, he fearlessly took position as litter bearer and maneuvered through an open field saturated with enemy fire in order to evacuate his wounded comrades. His selfless and courageous actions contributed directly to saving the lives of 2 Marines and the destruction of multiple enemy positions. With an estimated 20 enemy killed in action throughout the day-long firefight, by his extraordinary guidance, zealous initiative, and total dedication to duty, Staff Sergeant Buckminster reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and the United States Naval Service. The combat distinguishing device is authorized for the President, Ray Mavis, Secretary of the Navy.